Now, you probably recognise one of these lovely humans from playing the piano earlier. Cyprian here is the founder of FutureSeeds. What I love about Cip is we met a few years ago at an entrepreneurial event where I met this lovely man as well. And he had this burning need to not sit on the sidelines any longer, to not just be a coder and a freelancer, not just to be awash with the rest of society, and to step out into the light, to help other people to be the change they wanted to see in the world. Help those people that felt like, they've tried and it's too hard and they've given up or they don't know where to turn and where's all the other people like me? And Cip started this amazing podcast, which is now turned into this lovely live event where we can actually connect in person. And you guys are really blessed tonight to actually see him do his magic in person while he interviews the beautiful Mara Bun. Now, don't let the American accent or sound of American accent fool you. She's actually a Brazilian Australian, a nature lover, who started her early career with Morgan Stanley. With Morgan Stanley's technology group, actually. She shaped a career in innovation with roles including Director of Business Development for the CSIRO. Wow, try that for a listastic. Strategy Leader for Food Agility for the CRC, and Senior Internet Equities Analyst for Macquarie Bank. Her NGO experience includes senior roles at Greenpeace, Choice, Green Cross Australia, and Bush Heritage Australia. She applies environmental and humanitarian values as a non-executive director of the Australian Ethical Investments and as the chair of Asset Consultants for Australian Impact Investments. Mara is founding director of the board of Enova. Did I get it right? Excellent. Community Energy. So Enova Community Energy. I'm going to hand over to you now, Cip. And the beautiful Mara.
Thank you, Jade. Jade's right. I'm totally guilty. I'm an idealist through and through. But I think Mara here is too. So Mara, you're the president of the Australian Conservation Foundation. You're a director at the $5 billion Australian Ethical Investment Fund, and you're on the board of Australian Impact Investment. Mara, my first question for you is, what drives you?
Well, can I say the themes tonight are just so what I think about. You know, what is it to live and examine life in this crazy world that I think Helena reminded us we actually created, and it's just a small sliver of a long evolution, and we are part of that evolution. We actually are part of nature. We come from nature, and here we are so divorced from it. And this idea that getting to know each other and finding resilience, but then also connecting to neighbors and place is just so fantastic. And then I'm really inspired by the idea that this broken democracy, this thing that theoretically we create, you know, we can recreate, and that there's models. And I'm just so proud of New Democracy that it's not just doing it here, but actually now changing the world, you know, exporting these ideas. It's just fantastic. So I'm driven by all these things, but I have to say I'm super, super excited because, I don't know, COVID has been so crazy, right? And we're all sitting in this world trying to heal ourselves while still, you know, my family is in lots of different places, and it's very difficult. You know, it's been very difficult in Brazil the last year. But I remember the last day before we went into lockdown in the beginning of March, ACF had lost this legal case, and we just thought, you know, we're going to have one more go because we know we're right. And we reached out to our supporters, and tens of thousands of people gave tiny amounts of money, $10, $20, and we raised enough money. And we took Adani to court again, and yesterday we won.
Yesterday.
So You know, is it going to shut down the mine? I don't think so. Maybe it's going to make it even more difficult now that it's not insurable. It set an almighty precedent about the water table. It is outrageous that we have federal environmental laws that a tiny little nonprofit that employs 80 people has to take the government to court to hold them accountable for implementing their own laws. But it's a really wonderful precedent. It goes to the heart of this trade-off that we have between agriculture, food, caring for land, the water table, and mining, and particularly mining fossil fuels. So what gets me out of bed is the combination of people power and living this examined life where we care about ideas enough that we come out and just meet each other and talk. And also, you were amazing. You called me out of the blue and started talking, and I thought, wow, I wanted to meet you.
Well, thank you. So that's the first thing. So as I said, she's part of Australian Conservation Foundation, Australian Ethical, and Australian Impact Assessment, 3 different things. And there's one sentence you told me in our pre-call, Mara. There's an emergency. We have to deal with it in any way possible, and perfection is going to be the enemy of the good. So I'm going to cut that into 3 things. There's an emergency. We have to deal with it in any way possible. Yeah. Perfection is going to be the enemy of the good. Let's not dwell too much on there's an emergency, because we know that.
We all know that.
So we have to deal with it in any way possible, and you're dealing with it with those 3 organizations: conservation, ethical investment, and impact investment. So let's speak about, because you already spoke about conservation, I wanted to mention the Adani fight. Let's speak about ethical investment. I read somewhere, I don't remember if it was FutureSeeds or Bank Australia, but I read this sentence. Every time 34 people switch to an ethical financial institution, that is 1 million that doesn't end up in the pocket of the fossil fuel industry. I hope everyone heard that. 34 people, that's 1 million that doesn't end up in the pockets of the fossil fuel industry. I read on the Australian Ethical Investment website that the carbon intensity of Australian ethical share investment is 75% less than classic funds. Is that right? So I understand that this has a really strong impact. As I said when I started, in France we protest a lot. But how many times have we realized that we were protesting while having our money in the banks working against us 10 times, having 10 times the impact of us actually protesting against this thing? Can you talk a little bit about that, the impact of our money in the bank and our supers?
Yeah, it is interesting, isn't it, that we think about the food that we eat, the cars that we buy, we try to reduce our energy consumption. We think that as agents, there's small things that we can do, and we kind of forget that, you know, capitalism is about capital, you know, like that just is what it is about. And at some level, connecting to the power of investment to create a different world. And when I said, and I remember that conversation we had, because I have been booed off the stage of Splendor in the Grass, not once but twice, in the forum for talking about money, because some people just don't like talking about money, and I appreciate that, and there might be people here that, please, feel free. I'm getting used to it now. But it's like, yes, it's true that, you know, this local thing is really important, and a local economy where your finance can be applied locally by choices that you make is fantastic, right? But at the same time, and I know we're not going to talk too much about the emergency, but let's talk about it a little bit, right? So in leading business development for CSIRO, I really had the privilege of learning a lot from very, very bright minds, including the climate scientists who, for many decades now, have been deeply immersed in these models, and their fear, their trembling is actually bigger than they're able to express, because it turns out they have to make themselves more conservative to be acceptable. So things like the IPCC reports that come out, They may sound shocking, but they're a very watered down version. And when you spend time with them as people and they tell you, I can't see how we're heading towards anything but 3 or 4 degrees. And then you really understand what that means for the planet, for nature on which we not just depend, but from which we evolved, you know. It is so existential, this crisis that we're in, and so speed is really important right now. We have thermal inertia in the climate system. We need to radically transform energy models. And so at the same time as I think the story of Enova is just incredible, that this community not only said no to coal seam gas, but decided that it was going to create an energy company that did things differently. And it raised its own capital to do that. And I remember that period, the first few years, and all of you that are shareholders, thank you.
You can clap.
I mean, it's an incredible story, right? It's an incredible story. We have been, and still are going through, shocks in wholesale electricity prices, regulatory changes, crazy politicians trying to distort markets away from renewables, amazing things, and yet we went from 2,000 to 5,000 to over 10,000 customers. It's just an exceptional and extraordinary story, and it is one about local empowerment, local models. You know, the industrial estate here, we just did the local grid, which is incredible, and found all the benefits. We've done Australia's first solar garden. All of that is so important, and I want that model, that distributed, decentralized model to scale, but unless we invest in breaking coal, oil, and gas really quickly, our kids are gonna fry, and our ecosystems are just so desperately at risk, right? So we need to do it both ways. We need to do it ground up, and then the power of your investment ethically is not just that you know it's supporting the right investment, the right enterprises, the right technology, it's being used in advocacy. And if you had told me 10, 20 years ago that the shareholder votes in Australia would be going the way they're going now, it's pretty insane. Where companies like Woodside are literally hitting 50, 51% votes, calling them out for having no plan B. These are very large companies. So it's amazing what can happen when you show that same intention that you show to your shopping and your eating, show it to your investment.
Thanks. Australian ethical share investment have 3.8 times the sustainable impact of an equivalent investment in the overall share market. So even calculated that. I ran a little poll online on Facebook. I had only 55 participants, but it was fun to see the result. 28 think the financial system is the core of our issue. Yeah, you agree with that? I had like a list of 5 different systems that we should attack first. Financial system, food system, education system, election system. I was quite impressed. The election system had only 3 votes. Funny, you know? But yeah, 28 voted that the financial system is the core.
I mean, that's really interesting. I'm glad you ran that little poll. You know, when I was invited, it seriously has been such an honor. The team at ACF is incredible, and the fact that they've been going for more than 50 years, creating the national parks that we now need to really double and triple and amplify, but controlling the climate, you know, as a really key underpinning cause. When I was approached, you know, would you consider being a part of ACF, they told me that they actually ran the same poll in a slightly different way. They approached the Monash Sustainability Institute to ask the question, what are the underlying causes of unsustainability? What are the systemic issues? And they came out with 4. And one of them actually was democracy. And it's not surprising either, because our nonprofits, our charities have been under threat, for those of you that have followed this. You know, the federal government has been trying to remove tax deductibility and remove the ability to be advocates. that somehow to be an environment group, it means all you need to do is plant trees. You can't actually advocate for the laws that control how you remove trees. You know, it's crazy. So democracy, and then absolutely economy. And, you know, how we've been thinking a lot, as has, you know, all of us and so many more, how do we create something that is viable where we can be prosperous, but sustain the human condition as well as nature? I love donut economics. Has anyone else been following the donut economics? It's a brilliant model. You know, it came out of a woman from Oxford, at Oxford University, and it has like the constraints of the natural world on the outside and then basic social equity on the inside, and the economy happens between those two, like the donut. So the economy, and then absolutely, you know, the system that energy is a critical system, and we need to transform that as well. And then the laws that govern nature, those are the underlying causes. But one way or another, capital is a root cause for all of those things. So your little Facebook thing is really, really important, right? Like, impact investment is this new wave which is now coming, you know, and I'm sure we're going to talk about that, so I'll let you ask. But I'm super excited by how that the fact that we have capital and finance, and the finance system as the root cause, to me is an invitation to bust it open and recreate it. Because if we can scale something that has a different kind of solution, given that systemic winding up of the mess that we're in, then we should do it.
Yes, good segue. Let's talk about impact investment. I saw that you categorize investments with your methodology HABC. H is for harm the planet, A for avoid harming the planet, B for benefit the people and planet, and C to contribute to solutions. And that most of the investment of Australian impact investment went to B and C, benefit the people and planet and contribute to solutions. I also read over the year we have worked with our clients to direct 38 million to investments seeking to effect positive environmental and social change. 9 new investments were introduced to clients across a range of environmental and social areas, including regenerative agriculture specialists, disability accommodation, disability technology, and renewable energy. First of all, congratulations. That's really cool.
If only I could take credit. I just joined that board. They are amazing.
But it is a really interesting development of investment, what happened in the last 20 years. And it's developing lots more. You told me that it's estimated that we need $5 to $7 trillion invested into the sustainable development goals. And we're getting about 50 billion per year. Is that right?
So, you know, remember we had those millennium goals? And just like Y2K, you know, they kind of came and went. And so there was so much effort and really good thinking across civil society, government, business around how to frame, you know, these sustainable development goals. And there's 17 of them. And the thing that's marvelous is they reach right across the planet. You know, some are directly about poverty, some are directly about ecosystems, some are about education, women's empowerment, water, food, you know, there's many of them. The invitation really is to kind of put our money where our mouth is. And there have been credible models now developed about what it will take to invest in new economies, both local and global, that directly solve those goals. And it is a big number. It's $5 to $7 trillion, but you know, if you watch the news and just wake up when they talk about the cost of that last bomber that we bought that never flew, you know, from Boeing or whatever, I mean, often it's a crazy number. Like, we actually can do this thing. We can harness this capital and bring it in this direction. And these two things, you know, Australian Ethical, which some of you may know, it's a super fund, managed funds, and then Australian Impact Investments. I want you to understand, like, how personally I feel the joy of this ecosystem coming out of the ground. I landed in Australia with a backpack in 1988 between investment banking and business school, and the place I went for comfort was, you know, the Wilderness Society office on Liverpool Street. And I was just there as a volunteer, and it was not long after the Franklin, and so there was a lot of money, and I said, I'll count your money at least, you know, let me do that, and whatever. I just made myself useful and started to meet people who were the founders of what became Australian Ethical, of what became Ethinvest, that then became Australian Impact Investments. This ecosystem, it actually is people like you. And if there's young people here who feel a little bit like, oh my God, it's just so bad, it felt bad back then too. And these people, they actually created these things that are now worth billions and doing really cool things, you know? So I feel like the rise of impact investment, which is an intentional methodology where, you know, for those of you that are in finance, accounting, and you understand, you know, you have to understand the value of a business, understand its risks, understand its, you know, likelihood to, you know, trade and create returns for investors, blah, 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 that you apply the exact same rigor and discipline to the impact. Is it real? Is it deep? Is it lasting? You know, how do you know? And then this expertise, and we're going to have a lot of what they call SDG washing, just like greenwashing, right? Yeah. But there will be metrics, there will be models, there will be analysis, and you will be able to decide how to invest in this new world and help create it.
Thank you, Mara. I knew this interview was going to be way too short. I already had the red sign over there. I hope we could, yeah, we can. We have something else for you guys planned. But I'd love to have another interview with you much longer later on. And there's something we do at the end of each FutureSeeds interview. Get 1-2 minutes. If you were to express yourself to the whole world right now, what would be your message? What do you want people to know?
God, what a low bar.
Well, I've done it with Elena and Carson, and it worked all right.
Well, yeah, I'm looking at Carson. 4 or 5 years ago, the same scientists that have been pointing out, you know, through the IPCC, this impending existential risk, you know, that's coming and coming, they produced a report about land-based sources of emissions, and that relates to agriculture and land use. And there was one statistic in that report that I just remember when I read it, I went, like, that must be a typo, right? And so how I would describe it is like, imagine that I'm holding an apple, and the apple represents the land mass of the planet. So not the ice, not the water, just the land. And then imagine that not too long ago, we kind of came out of this hunter-gathering mode and moved into agriculture and cities, and then our needs began to grow as our population grew, and we needed, you know, land for food, for transport, for clothing, for cities. If you begin to peel that apple, in that little blip of time, we have now peeled 72% of the apple. That's what we have crunched through nature. And if we're wondering, like, why COVID? Well, you know. So we really need to rethink, how do we grow a new apple out of the existing land? How do we restore it? And that would, I guess, be my main kind of invitation for us to imagine. And what I'm most excited about in this world where investment is going to be really critical, I'm really confident now because I've seen the demand curve, I've seen the supply curve, I've understood the technology behind it, and I'm really confident that 20 years from now, it will be more profitable for a farmer to farm nature than food. We are going to value restoration, and we will still be able to feed the planet, because guess what? A lot of it is food waste. That's why we're not feeding the planet. So imagine a world where we create an economy where we can value restoring that apple. That is worth something.
Thank you so much.